Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Cuomo. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Trite but true, right? You know the expression. But as a nation, we're not putting it into practice. And the difference that makes is everything. We know we have big problems, both here and now abroad. Yet what are we addicted to monitoring? Those situations? No. The game. We're addicted to watching the parties play to advantage. You can roll your eyes and say, I've heard him go down this road before. But then ask yourself, why do you keep doing it? Why do all of us keep allowing this binary battle to the bottom, necessarily zero sum? That's all the party politics can be. It has to naturally be about which is worse. We all just sit back and watch what they're doing to one another, making us crazy. It's not about engagement, not even online. It's about enragement. They gotta provoke you. They gotta make you angry, right? That's what works SEO and gets you the clicks. That's why the platforms put the ads next to the most provocative stuff. And that's what works politically. That's what works the needle. Fear this, bad them, right? So we are focused on what's good for them instead of what they're doing for us. I say enough with what they're doing to each other. More about what they're doing for us. Too much word salad, you say. Not enough meat on the bones. Okay, look at today. What's the lead story? There it is. Stormy Daniels, right? You know her name. You know all about their relationship, right? It's almost as galling as how much you're probably aware of the Kardashians. Why? Because it's fed to you and it's tasty. Her graphic testimony, Stormy Daniels today, about the brief sexual encounter she says she had with Donald Trump in 2006. They said, I don't even know that she's really meaningful in the case. Oh, she's meaningful. Her testimony was so meaningful that it led to a call for a mistrial today. And another just example. We're so addicted to what these two sides tell us matters that even if you want to go down the Trump legal issue thing, because there are aspects to it that matter, the latest outcome in the federal documents case with Judge Cannon saying we can't schedule a trial right now, we have to deal with other things, is a way more serious case and way more important than the Stormy Daniels stuff in this Fugazi case that so many people passed on until a Democrat named Bragg decided to make his name on it. But it's not as tantalizing, so it doesn't get the attention. I'm telling you, her testimony today, though, did matter because it was really graphic and so personal that it became kind of disruptive. And again, after it, the former president's counsel called for a mistrial. The judge said no. Now, were they right to call for one? Was the ruling right to deny them that? We'll discuss, all right? I've got better minds for you on that, all right? Now, I also want us here to be part of the solution. So I'm not just going to point out the game that's being played around us and then play along, right? So I want to give us a diversion from the parade of the pathetic. And I want to give you real proof of what we're not focusing on. Because at the same time today, that the best media on the planet, which is our media in America, right, is all on Stormy, right? You know what was happening at the Capitol? Do you know? There was a hearing about fentanyl that almost nobody attended. And it was all about what's being done and what's not being done. Did you know that today is National Fentanyl Awareness Day? I laugh because I've never seen us ignore something that's kicking our ass as bad as fentanyl. I've been around addiction and enabling and treatment and seeing the societal destruction of this for 30 years of my life. I've never seen anything like fentanyl. And today you had the FDA commissioner talking to members of Congress about what needs to happen and how bad it is, and nobody gives a spit. So we're going to look at it. And we're going to talk to a senator who has a bill that he tried to get passed, but he couldn't. And you need to understand why he couldn't. We got to match the fact with the fiction when it comes to fentanyl. All right? So let's start with what matters here, okay? President Biden set a new line that is frighteningly like what we heard, or I heard, from President Obama way back when in Syria. The guy was obviously doing, Assad, what Obama said he couldn't do. Now, again, here in Israel, I believe that Israel is doing exactly what Biden seemed to suggest they shouldn't be doing, which is to go into Rafah hot and heavy. And yet that's what they did. The IDF seized a border position. Now, why was Biden supposed to see this as a bright line? Because once again, you have a setup for a humanitarian catastrophe. You've got nearly 600,000 kids, according to UNICEF, that are in this area and exposed to the violence. And again, U.S. officials say, well, but this doesn't cross the line. Now, I have better guests to discuss this, but I'll give you a quick take. There's only one reason that President Biden would say this doesn't cross the red line, because he's got no power to make it stop. Now, first, I want to bring in John Spencer, all right, one of the foremost experts on urban warfare, recently returned from Gaza, so he's got fresh eyes, okay? It's good to see you, brother. Also, Arwa Damon, my friend, former senior international correspondent for CNN, founder of INARA, INARA. If you want to help, okay, do some more walk for your talk and go donate to INARA like we did here with the money for the free agent gear that I'm selling, which is why I'm selling it, okay? She has also been there recently. So thank you both. Arwa, thank you especially for being up in the middle of the night where you are. Now, what do you make of the Biden determination that Rafah is okay, and what do you believe are the stakes on the ground?
Well, first of all, Rafah is far from okay, because you have tens of thousands of people that have had to move. You have this sheer and total panic that has spread everywhere. And you also have the reality that in, the taking of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt by the IDF, no humanitarian aid entering, and has not, in fact, entered in the last 48 hours. And the fallout from that is going to be absolutely catastrophic. Add to that, Chris, the areas that people are being told to go to, one of them is basically a neighborhood that is little more than rubble right now. And the other is this area that is effectively beachfront. So lots of sand dunes, absolutely no infrastructure, already packed with tents. And it's causing this emotional roller coaster, where I was talking to a friend of mine in Rafah, actually, who had to evacuate. And she was basically comparing it to having, other people playing emotional ping pong with herself and all other civilians right now caught in all of this.
Arwa, a quick bounce question, and then I want to get to John's take on what America's doing here and how much can it do. I keep complaining that a material mistake that the IDF, that Israel is making, is not letting people like you, not in an aid worker capacity, but as a journalist, on the ground. They say it's too dangerous, but that's what I watched you for years. Go to dangerous situations, more dangerous even than this. Do you believe that this is a major mistake by Israel? If so, what do you think should be done about it, and by whom?
Well, first of all, absolutely. Does Gaza need more journalists? Does it need eyes on the ground from every single outlet that exists there? Absolutely, 100%. But the danger excuse is always conveniently used by the Israelis and by other countries when they basically want to keep journalists from seeing what is actually transpiring on the ground. There has to be a much bigger push by networks, but also by governments, to basically try to convince the Israelis to allow access to Gaza. But given that, a country like the U.S. can't even get Israel to dial back on its offensive, it's not going to be likely that they're going to be able to convince Israel to allow, the press inside to cover what is actually happening. Because, Chris, you cannot go into Gaza and have the same understanding of what's happening, even if you're following minute by minute from the outside. Being in there, it just enhances your understanding to an entirely different level.
Yeah, that has to be true. And I think that Israel, John, to bring you into the conversation, and again, thanks, brother, it's good to have you here, and I want your perspective based on what you saw on the ground there. I think they're hurting themselves because there's so much propagandizing of material that does come out of Gaza that, you know, I don't know how this is any worse than what it would be if you had people just showing what the reality is. What was your take on the ground? And let's start the conversation.
So, Chris, my take on the ground in Khan Yunis was the extreme difficulty that the IDF has faced against Hamas, using everything it can, to include, as recent as yesterday, attacking humanitarian ports and entryways, doing anything it can to push the narratives. But what I saw was an IDF fighting for not just for destroying the enemy, but for protecting civilians. And I saw it in ways that I didn't even think were possible in this kind of urban combat.
Do you think that the Israelis are conducting themselves the way America would in the same situation?
So that's a tricky question. Actually, the steps that Israel has taken to prevent civilians, I honestly believe, and have shown through research, is more than the United States has ever taken in any battle, and especially in any war. I think the United States would have ended this already, my personal opinion. And this is where, like you say, Rafah going in hot and heavy, that's actually not what they've done. And they are actually have had to go slower. They went from 4 divisions down to 1 brigade in all of Gaza, as the United States has put pressure on them to do it a different way. And that means slower. That means that the humanitarian issues that are in Gaza, which I believe are there, are being prolonged because Hamas is still in power and still has 132 hostages. So the quicker you get this done, the better for everybody.
What do you make of that, Arwa?
Well, I think, first of all, it's quite different to compare, you know, someone's lived experience on the ground in Gaza with that of someone who is being escorted by the IDF. It's not necessarily a, you know, independent picture of what's happening. Add to that, you know, I've been on plenty U.S. military operations myself, and I've seen how the U.S. military carries out targeting of, you know, individuals that are on its wanted lists. And it most certainly does not wait for those individuals to enter into a crowded civilian area before launching a strike on them. Add to all of that, this has mostly been a battle that has been carried out through airstrikes and less so on the ground. And so going in with less military force on the ground, sure, is one thing, but the issue is in the airstrikes. The other big issue also is that you have the sheer absurdity of telling civilians to evacuate to areas where there is absolutely no infrastructure to be able to receive them. There's no proper shelter, there's no proper sanitation, and there's absolutely no medical infrastructure. And to do that before, you know, those things can be set up is just an unnecessary level of amplification of a population's pain.
John, your response to that?
Well, my response on the first part is maybe I'm not taking my analysis based on my walking around with the IDF, but maybe I'm taking it from 25 years in the U.S. Army to include 2 combat tours in urban terrain in Iraq. So when I say that Israel has taken more steps than any nation of the world in preventing casualties, I mean it through both research and from experiences, from targeting to evacuating cities. And if you're saying that you shouldn't evacuate cities, you should leave them there, then that's putting civilians in harm's way. And there's no shortage of footage coming out of Gaza. Yes, if you had independent journalists with free reign of access, but then you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, as Israel gets blamed for the death of journalists who are in harm's way.
Yeah, but, you know, look, everybody faces that. That's why you guys came up with the embed program, which was such an effective thing. I think that worked better for the military than it did for the media, but that's neither here nor there. That was the compromise to get the access. The access matters, especially as every day propaganda is overwhelming proper perspective in this situation. We see it here on campus. We see it everywhere. All right, guys, thank you very much. John, Arwa, I appreciate you both. Thanks for the perspective, and thank you for where you took the conversation. We must continue it. Arwa, stay safe. John, as always, appreciated. Now we're going to take a break, 4 minutes, 5 seconds. Well, why do I conduct the interview that way? I know where they're coming from. Right? Before. It's part of the preparation. It's part of understanding the story and understanding who I asked to be on the show. I lay it out that way with suppositions that I know are being made so that you can process the answers. I will often forward propositions that are not my own, that not necessarily reflect opinions that I have, because I'm not here to sell you on what I think. I'm here for you to have food for thought to develop what you believe. Now, Stormy Daniels. Brief sexual encounter, but boy, has it lasted a long time in the media from 2006 to now. She was obviously relevant. The question is, what was the impact she had on the case today? Did she help the man she certainly was there to hurt? I will give you the better minds.
Play and Alexa.
This Quest for Gold athlete spotlight from NewsNation on the Go features rhythmic gymnast Evita Grishkenis. The Chicago native punched her ticket to Paris in November. It'll be her second time representing Team USA in the Summer Games, and it comes the same summer she graduates from Columbia University.
I started my academic career with an Olympics because it was Tokyo, and now I'm ending it with an Olympics, and so I love that like perfect loop circle kind of vibe.
The early qualification gave her time to solidify her music and routine and really lock into the Paris competition, but most importantly to her audience.
I can speak a little bit more to the French audience, so I picked a French music for my ribbon routine, and I'm super excited to see how that connects. And I always say that the biggest part of my sport is that emotional connection with the audience, and I'm really excited to play on that.
Evita finished 12th overall in Tokyo. The highest the U.S. has ever finished in the Olympic sport is 9th. The rules did change a little compared to 3 years ago. Evita, by the way, graduated from Columbia with a degree in sports psychology. I'm Ryan Burrow for NewsNation on the Go. You can hear full athlete interviews and updates on the Summer Games by searching Quest for Gold on most podcast platforms.
Porn star Stormy Daniels. Isn't it interesting that there's been more discussion of that phrase? You really shouldn't call her that. You should call her adult entertainment. That we care about. But everything that's going around, this circus that is supposed to be our politics, we just ignore and let it keep being as terrible as it can be. Well, Ms. Daniels was on the stand today, and everybody said she wouldn't make a difference. But she made such a difference that Trump's counsel asked for a mistrial after she was detailing their very brief 2006 sexual encounter. Stormy testified, quote, "When I came out of the bathroom, Mr. Trump was on the bed in his boxer shorts and a T-shirt. I thought, oh, my God, what did I misread to get here? He was posing on the bed. He stood up, not in a threatening manner, but Trump tried to say, if you're serious about this, if you ever want to get out of that trailer park." She then described that they had sex and that she felt like she blacked out. But when asked if she remembers if the former president wore protection, she said Trump did not. Trump's attorneys quickly moved for a mistrial, stating that the testimony prejudiced the jury, which the judge rejected. So, what is the impact? Let's ask former New York City prosecutor Paul Callan and defense attorney Mark Garagos. Gentlemen, thank you both. Let's start with Mark, the judge. The judge fining him again for breaching the gag. Now it's up to like $9 grand. Him calling up lawyers to the bench and saying, I hear your client cursing under his breath. I don't want to embarrass him, so I'm speaking to you at the bench, but obviously it was able to be heard, which is how I'm reporting it right now. Mark, do you believe he is messing with Trump too much?
Do I believe he's messing with Trump too much? I can't even believe what he's doing in this case. Thank God I don't practice, and I make it not to practice in the state court of New York in criminal cases. This judge, to give it to him charitably, read his decision in order on the so-called contempt. It's a constitutional First Amendment violation on its face. It's absurd. The fact that he let in all of this testimony by Stormy Daniels today, how that has any relevance whatsoever to this case. I understand that a lot of judges sit there and carry the water of the prosecutors, but this is just so beyond anything that should be in this trial, in a trial that involves a prosecutorial theory that is almost ludicrous on its face, that's been rejected before. I don't even know where to begin. this case, and you're talking to somebody who has voted Democrat his entire life, who doesn't agree with Trump on much of anything, this case is utterly ridiculous.
Gotta disagree with you,
Paul,
Mark.
counter. Go ahead.
Well, you and I agree on a lot of things when we do these things, but I think this judge is handling the case in a good way. He's been keeping a tight rein. He's been moving the case along, and today was a good example. Stormy Daniels, I look at it as the good, the bad, and the ugly today. The good for the prosecutor was that she testified in great detail, proving her relationship with Trump. She was talking about exactly what happened when he first met her, took her to a hotel room. She could even identify the tiles in the bathroom to show you how much she had a recollection of it. She got into trouble later on in the day when she was cross-examined by the defense. But the thing we have to remember is her testimony exists for only one reason, and that is motive. What was the motive for falsifying the business records in this case? The motive was that Stormy Daniels' story, which looks like it's true based on today's testimony, but it wouldn't have to be true. The story she was going to tell publicly would have torpedoed Trump's presidential campaign. Thus, the hush money was paid. The business records were falsified in an attempt to influence the election. So Stormy did a great job today in the end, because when you look at her, when you consider the testimony that would have come out in a presidential election, it might have destroyed Trump's presidential election. That's all they had to prove. What was the motive? And she proved it.
But, this is where Paul and I love reasonable minds can differ. But transport yourself back to October of 2016. Nobody, including Donald Trump, believed for a second that he was going to win. I was publicly betting people that he would, and I could have given 100 to 1 odds. Nobody thought he was going to win, including him, number one. Number two, the fact of whether her story was true or not is of no relevance to the falsifying of business records. Remember, we've already heard that there was a doorman in Trump Tower who was going to say he was going to tell a story about a father that Trump was the fathering of a child out of wedlock, which is now demonstrably not true. That didn't matter. It doesn't matter at all for the catch and kill. Let me ask you this then, Mark. One thing, why, and one thing only. If that were true, it's only designed to embarrass him.
If that were true, why would Trump have apologized for the Access Hollywood statement and said, this is not me? I would never say anything like that. When he's apologizing, when he's plummeting in the polls because of the Access Hollywood statements, and what happens next? Stormy Daniels happens next. She's going to come in, a porn star, and say she had sex with him and saw him on numerous occasions. And he's got photographs of himself with Stormy Daniels, and he doesn't deny that it's him in the photos. Those two things, Access Hollywood and Stormy
You want to know
Daniels,
why? I'll give you 2 words. I'll give you 2 words.
Go ahead.
He's got a wife. He's got a wife, Melania, number one. Number two, I read this morning a wonderful thread by, I believe it was Seth Abramson, who talked about the fact, which I remember vividly, nobody thought he was going to win, including himself, but he was not going to pull out. He was, pun intended, he was not going to withdraw from this race as everybody was pressuring him to do after the Access Hollywood tape. There was no way that this was
he apologized
the primary,
for the Access Hollywood
even a
tape,
mixed motive.
He was going to take the biggest shot he could at winning it. And to do that, he had to falsify those business records and send Michael Cohen out to suppress this story. What do you think? Why would he pay? Let me ask you this.
Only one problem with that, Paul.
This, Mark.
Only one
maybe
problem.
Rules are different in Hollywood than New York.
The only one problem, though, Paul.
Why would he pay her $130,000? Why? Why does he pay her $130,000?
You nailed it exactly. Things are different in Hollywood than New York. This was Hollywood. They do this all the time. I've been on both ends of this for years. This is absolutely exactly what happens in Hollywood. This is not and never had anything to do with the election. By the way, Paul, I'm trying to. You won't let me answer. When were the checks written? They were written after the election. After, Paul, take a look at the evidence. That's what undercuts this whole theory by the prosecution and answers your question. These weren't things that were done prior to the election. It was all after the election. It wasn't to win the election.
It was to win the election and to have her back off on a story that would have destroyed his candidacy. All of this stuff had been negotiated before the election with Michael Cohen, and we'll hear about it.
And then I'll tell you why.
Pardon me?
You will. And Michael Cohen, who's already Keith Davidson, has already testified. Keith Davidson has already said, Michael Cohen has said that he couldn't even get reimbursed. And that he wasn't getting a job from Donald Trump. And Keith Davidson already testified he never talked to Trump. You nailed it, Paul. You're right. When you say things are different in Hollywood than in New York.
I got to tell you, I don't know that they're different. I think there's a lot of shady things that happen everywhere. But, gentlemen, I'll tell you this. Cohen is the only thing that matters to me in this case. One, I don't know how the prosecutor leans on a guy that has such credibility issues. I know the political left has decided to make him a darling, but that is, that's a really, really strange choice, in my opinion. I know that what Mark is suggesting about Cohen was certainly true at the time because he told me that. I hope I don't get hauled into court. But I remember Cohen giving me different versions of this story of what happened. The guy told me that Melania had no idea that this was going on, and then he would flip his story and say that she knew everything. I don't know how you hang a case on the guy, to be honest, but we got to jump. That was very helpful. Very helpful. Paul Callan, Mark Garagos, I love the mutual respect, and I love the banter. Thank you very, very much. Let's take a break. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. When we come back, we're looking at that Trump hush money. I know everything about Stormy Daniels. I can tell you everything about how it happened. I know everything about Michael Cohen and his HELOC. I can't tell you a damn thing about what this country is doing to stop a drug from killing more people than we've ever had killed by a drug before. Fentanyl's being ignored. None of us know that today is National Fentanyl Awareness Day. And what the heck difference does it make if you're aware? Because is it worse to be aware and not do anything, which is us? The DEA administrator testified before a bipartisan commission today of Congress. Where was the press? Absent. What are we doing? Bubkiss. 100,000 people a year. I got a lawmaker who's trying to get something done. He's going to tell you why we are where we are. It's a great litmus test. You look at what's pissing off everybody online, and if you have any kind of question about whether or not it's so overwhelmingly artificial and BS, find me where people are pissed off about nothing happening with fentanyl. Today's National Fentanyl Awareness Day. Nothing is as threatening. Nothing. None of these trials with Trump, none of what you may or may not want to believe about Biden and his son, nothing that's happening in the Middle East, nothing that's happening on campus. There's no bigger threat on campus than fentanyl. And it should be something that has all our attention. I thought it would be the uniting issue. I thought it would be the signature social issue of this election. I am a dummy because the game wins. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death among 18 to 45-year-old people in this country. 18 to 45. That's 2 generations worth of people. And we don't give a damn. Here's a post from our reporter today on Capitol Hill that got us to want to do the segment this way. All eyes are justifiably focused on a courtroom in New York City. I don't agree that it's justifiable. Meanwhile, in a small committee room in the U.S. Capitol, the DEA administrator is talking about the fentanyl crisis, which kills 70 to 100,000 Americans every year. I'm one of maybe 2 or 3 reporters in the room. Now, why? Because we don't care. But what's our out? I'll give it to you. Our leaders don't give a damn about fentanyl because the right can't make Biden own it, and the left doesn't see a clear win in it for them as a social agenda, so they do nothing. Proof? The senator I'm bringing in right now from Wisconsin, Republican Senator Ron Johnson, okay? He has a bill that he wanted to get passed on the fentanyl crisis and actions that could be taken, and he's gotten nowhere. Senator, what is the reality of the talk versus the walk when it comes to the willingness to help what is absolutely a catastrophe?
Well, first of all, I have to disagree with you that we're not doing anything. When I was chairman of the Homeland Security Governmental Affairs Committee, we spent a fair amount of time on fentanyl. We recognize that China, who produces most of the precursor chemicals for all drugs, including illegal drugs like fentanyl, they were sending a lot of these fentanyl different analogs through the mail, right into America directly. And so we clamped down on that. Rob Portman had a really good bill that we got passed through. I had a bill, and this is the one thing you're talking about, the SOFA Act, stopping overdoses from fentanyl analogs. It would have scheduled all these analogs. All they had to do is change the molecule a little bit, and all of a sudden it's a scheduled drug. So it would classify all those. Now that in other forms is now DEA did that by regulation, and now that's passed Congress and been signed into law as well. So again, we've been making some progress on this, but here's the main problem, Chris. Now, I don't know the exact numbers now, but when I was chairman of the committee, we were holding roundtables and hearings on this. $800 of precursor chemicals for fentanyl produced $800,000 of street value. Now, again, that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And it's not helpful that we have an open border. In Wisconsin, we used to have all kinds of problem with methamphetamine labs, people producing these in their garage. It's not a problem anymore because it's a lot cheaper. You get lower cost and higher quality methamphetamine along with fentanyl. So China, again, this is a strategy on the part of China to weaken, destroy its adversary, America. They send the precursor chemicals now into Mexico. They'll put them into counterfeit pills, which is what is so incredibly dangerous. People, college student wants to stay up to take a test, thinks he's taking a prescription drug to keep him awake. No, it's laced with fentanyl. Never wakes up or just dies at his computer. I've heard tragedy after tragedy. So again, the main problem is where you have a demand for this drug and there's such an enormous profit in it. Going to be a supply. Now we make that supply so much easier with Biden's open border and by not putting pressure on China. I think that's part of the problem with Biden being compromised. Again, these are just the facts.
I push back a little bit on your pushback. Every source I have says the problem has only gotten worse. China has skirted your regulations. There's more drug being made in America than there was before. They now send the chemicals that are the precursors to the precursors, which gets around the regulation. More people are dying. And I don't understand why lawmakers don't see this as the signature domestic threat. What is killing more people than this?
Well, again, I think we do. It's a moving target. These people are smart. Again, there's so much profit in this. Again, multiple years ago, $800 of precursor chemicals, $800,000 of street value. And again, that's 5, 6 years ago. I'm sure the profits have only gotten worse. So again, it's an enormous problem. I think people are paying attention to it. You can argue we haven't been particularly effective at it. We haven't. 70,000 overdose deaths, fentanyl, over 100,000 with other drugs. Again, it doesn't help that we have an open border. It doesn't help that President Biden is compromised by China, so he's not putting the pressure on China that should be applied to him. Again, this is an adversary of ours. They are producing these precursor chemicals. They are making sure that they go into Mexico and they get compounded into these drugs, and it's killing Americans. I mean, it's a tough situation. When I was chairman of the committee, when I went down to Central America just to figure out all the interdiction, at most, we interdict about 10%, whether it's cocaine, whether it's fentanyl, 10%. I come from manufacturing. In manufacturing, that's called scrap. So DEA is trying, I think lawmakers are trying But when you have the demand and that much profit in it, it's not easy.
Especially if it's not your main priority. I'm just saying I would love for there to be a new test in Congress that every time you're going to take up a cause, think about, is this as important as fentanyl in terms of what's a danger to the families that I'm supposed to be protecting? Senator, I appreciate you trying to get something done, and you're always welcome here to have a platform to discuss what's being done, what isn't, and why. Appreciate you, Senator Ron Johnson.
Have a good evening.
All right, you too. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Speaking of government, where are they on the guys who are still stuck in Turks and Caicos? I get that they brought in ammo. I get that there's a rule. But you got to think about the sufficiency of the rule, okay? These guys didn't bring in weapons. They had stray ammo that they forgot about. 12 years in prison. Are you kidding me? 2 American fathers, young kids and wives. Turks and Caicos, we don't have enough leverage to get these guys out? What the heck is going on here? Next. America first. Good. Get outraged by the 3 Americans that are detained in Turks and Caicos. Oh, but they did it. What did they do? They carried spare ammo that they forgot about. They didn't have weapons with them. They left it in their luggage. 12 years in prison? Seriously? We don't have enough leverage with Turks and Caicos to make something make sense? 39-year-old Brian Hagerich, former pro baseball player from Pennsylvania. He claims he unknowingly brought 20 rounds of ammo to the island in February. Now, 20 rounds may sound like a lot. It's basically like 3/4 of a box, depending on the size of the shells or the ammo. You know, he was there on vacation. He wasn't there to shoot. He didn't know he had it in there. 40-year-old Ryan Watson from Oklahoma also says he unknowingly brought 4 rounds of ammo, 4 rounds, okay, to the island in April. He and his wife were there with friends celebrating their birthdays. His wife was also arrested, eventually released, returned home to be with their 2 kids. Brian, and I think we had her on the show, Brian and Ryan are currently sharing an Airbnb in Turks and Caicos as they wait to hear what their sentences will be. Now, I've been hearing this stuff online. Oh, they're in Turks and Caicos. Oh, that's really rough. Hey, man, they got lives back here. They got kids back here. They got professions back here. And it's all on hold, and they're staring at prison time. Joining us now from there, Turks and Caicos, Brian and Ryan. I should add the third guy, Tyler Weinrich, an EMT worker from Virginia, is currently being held in a detention center on the island. He didn't get the deal that these 2 guys have, at least not yet. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm happy to give you guys the opportunity to make your case. Ryan, I'll start with you. What do you want people to say who are basically, hey, you know, you did it. This is the law. What were you thinking bringing ammo? What's your response?
Well, we're all human. I mean, first and foremost, we've all made mistakes, whether that's big, small. You know, you brought up 20 rounds. You know, it's essentially the size of 2 cell phones. So in the grand scheme of things, you're talking a massive piece of luggage. It can happen to you. And for those that don't think it can, it certainly can. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know, the more people that we've talked to, the time that's gone on, people have reached out left and right that they've been impacted by this before, whether it's here, other countries. It's real.
Brian, did you bring a weapon?
No, not at all.
Did you plan to get a weapon in Turks and Caicos?
No, I came here to make some memories with my wife and my children, ages 3 and 5 at the time. We had kids' toys, pool toys, everything else packed in our bags. This was not in any way, shape, or form anything other than fun time with my family and kids.
Ryan, how common was it for you, not Brian now, Ryan Watson, how common was it for you to have ammo? Why did you have ammo in the bag at all for people who are not familiar with shooting?
Yeah, you know, I've actually never flown with any firearms or ammunition in my life. I've hunted my entire life. However, it just so happened that I've just driven to every location that I've been to. I, from the bottom of my heart, have no recollection of ever putting that ammunition in that bag. That's a weekend bag that we typically take, you know, I typically take for small trips. I can think of a time in which I brought that bag on a deer hunting trip. This past November, whenever I went to visit a friend in the Panhandle of Texas to do some whitetail hunting. I personally don't ever recall putting the ammunition in the bag. Whenever I got it off the top shelf, as we thought we might need additional space because we were getting heavy on our luggage, I opened it up, gave it a shake, never saw anything in there. It passed through TSA in Oklahoma City, and then, whenever they were going through the bag coming out of Turks and Caicos, we thought initially it was just my wife's makeup kit that they were curious about. But it took them 10 minutes to darn near just disassemble the bag, and then they finally extracted it.
And they didn't find it either.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, both of you guys have made it through TSA. How worried are you, Ryan and Brian, that while this seems to observers a little absurd, well, you can't go to prison for this. How worried are you, I'll start with you, Brian, that that's exactly what's going to happen here, that you're going to wind up having your life completely changed by a mistake?
Oh, absolutely terrified. I mean, to think that the next 12 years of my life separated from my family, I won't be able to watch my daughter graduate high school, let alone kindergarten. To think that just all of these family milestones, they're just gone. Everything we've worked for our whole life to get to this point, to, raise our young children, to be parents, and as my role as the father of the family, I take, responsibility of, providing protection and the upbringing of my children and my wife, and to not be able to be for that. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Ryan, what are they telling you about the wiggle room?
There's a lot of unknowns, and that's the scariest part of all of this is since the appellate court and the attorney general have pushed down this new ruling, there are a ton of question marks just hovering around us at this time. The most heartbreaking thing about all of this is whenever your children ask, Daddy, when are you coming home? And you can't give them an answer. It's heartbreaking. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't make it make sense to those young kids. So,
yeah, I've been here 87 days and I still wake up every morning thinking that I'm just, having a nightmare. And unfortunately, still haven't truly woke up from it, because it's just every single day is just continues and continues.
Well, look, you guys take care of each other, be good to each other. It's probably a blessing that you have each other in this right now. We will not let this go, okay?
Thank you.
Is bad policy, okay? Your families know they can get us. We've been talking to your families. We're here. You want counsel to contact us, let us know what's going on. This is the job. We will not forget what's going on, okay?
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
All right, gentlemen, take care of each other. Brian Hagerich, Ryan Watson, best to your families. Sorry about this situation. Doesn't that just suck? I mean, doesn't a policy have to make sense on some level anymore? Don't we have leverage? I get why we can't get them out of Russia. I get why Iran gets to do whatever it wants. They're scary. Turks and Caicos? Up next, final thought. 4 minutes, 45 seconds away. Final thought. Do you care about getting to a better place or playing gotcha? Think about it. Take a look at what you do online. I'm seeing it right now with our reporting on the vaccine. I never said I was vaccine injured. I have no idea. Is it possible? Maybe I had symptoms before I got vaccinated. They tell me I have long COVID. That's amorphous enough. But I know that there are questions. And I understand the data, and I understand the vaccine data in a way that you don't want to, which is you want it to seem like maybe